AITA for labeling all my food after my roommate's friends ate all my food at a party she threw and didn't warn me. I told her that she should pay for all the food. A couple of weeks ago, after a really long day at work where everything that could have gone wrong absolutely did, I came home around 7 in the evening, just wanting to collapse on the couch, order some takeout, and maybe binge a few episodes of whatever dumb show I had half finished on Netflix. I was exhausted, carrying my laptop bag, my gym clothes I had not even touched, and my mind was already focused on which leftovers I was going to heat up for dinner. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and immediately felt like I had just walked into the wrong apartment. There were people everywhere. Loud music was blasting from a Bluetooth speaker somewhere deep inside the apartment, there were shoes and bags littering the floor, empty beer bottles lined up on the kitchen counter, and the whole place smelled like a strange combination of tequila, weed, and Axe body spray. For a second, I literally stood there in the doorway, stunned, while a couple of people I had never seen before brushed past me, laughing, clearly too drunk to notice or care that I was just standing there like some confused extra who had wandered onto the wrong movie set. I finally managed to step inside, awkwardly weaving my way through groups of people packed into our tiny living room and even sitting on the floor in the hallway. I spotted my roommate, Madison, almost immediately. She was standing on top of one of our dining chairs, our white chairs, I might add, holding a red Solo cup in one hand and waving the other around while she told some animated story to a bunch of people crowded around her like she was the lead singer of a band. She caught my eye, smiled this huge, wild smile, and shouted, "You're home." Surprise, before immediately turning back to her adoring audience without a second thought. I was too tired to even process my emotions right then, so I did the adult thing and went straight to my room. I dropped my stuff, changed into sweatpants, and texted a few friends about the chaos that had taken over my living space. They sent back a mixture of sympathy and horrified emojis, but it was what it was. I figured I would just ride it out, maybe order some pizza, and lock myself in my room for the night. Except when I went to the kitchen to grab something to eat, my plan completely fell apart. I opened the fridge, expecting to see the groceries I had bought literally the day before, my Tupperware of pasta I had cooked for meal prep, my hummus, my little pre-cut veggie packs, my oat milk, my yogurt. Everything. Gone. The fridge looked like it had been looted. There were a couple of sad lemons rolling around on the shelves, one half-empty can of hard seltzer, and that was it. I checked the cabinets next, hoping maybe my snacks had survived the onslaught. Nope. My box of granola bars was open and empty. The bag of chips I had been saving for my treat-yourself movie night was ripped open and crushed. Even the loaf of bread I had just bought had been demolished, nothing left but 2 sad crusts. I turned to Madison, who was now leaning against the counter flirting with some guy wearing a backwards baseball cap and the cockiest grin I have ever seen. I said, "Madison, all my food is gone." She just blinked at me, totally unbothered, and said with a shrug, "Oops, sorry, people got hungry." Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like I was the weird one for being upset that random strangers had eaten every scrap of food I had painstakingly meal prepped and paid for with my very not gigantic paycheck. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw a chair. But instead, I just took a deep breath and told myself that I was not going to let this spiral into a huge, dramatic fight. I was not going to be the crazy roommate who screamed over oat milk. I went back into my room, ordered some expensive delivery I could not really afford, and spent the rest of the night trying to ignore the thudding bass shaking my walls. The next morning, after the hangover army finally cleared out, leaving behind a battlefield of sticky cups, cigarette butts, and a pizza box with one sad slice congealing on the coffee table, I decided I needed to make a point. I went grocery shopping again. I bought everything I needed and a little extra, feeling slightly victorious as I loaded up the cart with a second container of hummus just for good measure. When I got home, I unpacked everything neatly into the fridge and pantry. Then, I pulled out a thick black Sharpie, the kind that bleeds through paper if you press too hard, and labeled everything. I did not just write my initials. I wrote my full name in giant, unmistakable letters across every container, every box, every bottle. This belongs to my name. Do not eat. My name, S. Food. Hands off. My name, S. It felt a little petty, maybe, but I was fed up. I was tired of feeling like a guest in my own home. I was tired of my hard-earned groceries disappearing into the mouths of Madison's endless parade of drunk friends. Madison saw what I was doing as she stumbled into the kitchen wearing sunglasses and one of those huge oversized hoodies that practically eat you alive. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might actually strain something. She muttered something under her breath about how I was being dramatic but did not say anything directly to me. For a while after that, things were tense. I could feel the passive-aggressive energy radiating off Madison like heat from a broken radiator. She would slam the fridge door a little harder than necessary whenever she grabbed her stuff. She would mutter complaints when she thought I could not hear. She started bringing home even more takeout than usual, clearly avoiding the of my labeled groceries. I honestly started to wonder if I had overreacted. Was it really that big of a deal? But then I would think about how nobody had asked permission to throw a rager in our home. How nobody had thought for even a second about the groceries I had spent my time and money on. How Madison had not even offered to replace the food or apologize beyond a casual, dismissive oops. I have been doing my best to be civil. I have not started any fights, have not given any lectures. I have just kept to myself, cooked my own food, and lived my life. But the apartment still feels different now. Tense. Like a rubber band stretched just a little too tight. So now I am wondering, was labeling everything taking it too far? Was I being passive-aggressive when I should have just confronted her more directly? Or was it the only reasonable way to set a boundary when talking seemed completely pointless? I do not know. Maybe I handled it badly. Maybe I did exactly what I needed to do. Either way, I cannot help feeling like a stranger in my own kitchen now. So am I the asshole? Update 1. The first few days after the great labeling incident, Madison mostly kept her distance. She would breeze past me in the kitchen without a word, tossing her bag onto the counter and pretending I was not even there. I thought, stupidly, that we might have settled into a new, tense kind of truce, a mutual agreement to stay in our own lanes and not poke the bear. I stuck to my labeled food. She stuck to hers, or at least to whatever she decided to DoorDash that night. It was uncomfortable, but manageable. But of course, it did not last. One evening, while I was heating up some soup and minding my own business, Madison wandered into the kitchen, phone in hand, giggling at some text. Without even looking at me, she said in this sing-song voice, "You really are obsessed with your little food shrine, huh?" I blinked at her, confused, thinking maybe I had misheard. But no, she turned around, leaned dramatically against the counter, and gestured at the fridge like she was showing off an art exhibit. She said, "You know you made the kitchen look so ugly, right? Like, seriously. It's embarrassing." I did not respond. I just stirred my soup and told myself not to engage. I had seen enough petty roommate fights go nuclear to know it was not worth it. She wanted me to argue, wanted me to defend myself so she could keep feeling like the wronged party. I was not giving her that satisfaction. But the next morning, when I opened the fridge to grab my yogurt, I noticed that something was off. The label, the one I had written carefully across the top in bold black marker, was gone. At first, I thought maybe it had fallen off. I checked the floor around the fridge. Nothing. I checked the trash. Still nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid and slapped a new label on it. The day after that, 2 more labels were mysteriously missing. Then another. Then a whole bag of my almonds that had been labeled and tucked safely onto my designated shelf was just gone. No note, no text, nothing. I started getting suspicious, but I still wanted to believe it was an accident. I wanted to believe we were just 2 tired, stressed girls trying to cohabitate without tearing each other's throats out. That illusion shattered about a week later. It was around 10 at night, and I came back from a late shift, totally wiped out and craving the yogurt I had been saving all day. I dumped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen. As I rounded the corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, standing with the fridge wide open, was Tyler, one of Madison's regular hanger-ons, the kind of guy who always seemed to show up empty-handed but leave carrying half the fridge. In one hand he was holding my yogurt. In the other, he was slowly and deliberately peeling off the Sharpie label I had stuck to the lid. I must have made some kind of noise because he looked up, grinning like he had just gotten caught TPing a house. He shrugged and said, "If it doesn't have your name on it, it's fair game, right?" Like he was pointing out some hilarious loophole in a contract instead of admitting he was stealing my food right in front of me. Something inside me snapped. It was like all the little frustrations I had been swallowing down, the party, the missing food, the eye rolls, the passive-aggressive digs, the peeled-off labels, all boiled over at once. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just felt this cold, razor-sharp anger settle into my chest. I told Tyler to put the yogurt back, leave, and not come back unless he was invited by me, which, frankly, would be never. He laughed like he thought I was joking, but when I did not so much as twitch a smile, he muttered something under his breath and slunk out, slamming the door on his way. That should have been the end of it, but of course Madison had to escalate. When I confronted her about her friends disrespecting my stuff, she waved me off like I was complaining about a squeaky door. She said I was being dramatic and that, college students share food, that's just how it is. Like we were still in some dorm where stealing someone's ramen noodles was part of the bonding experience, not two adults paying rent for a shared apartment. I pointed out, calmly, because at this point my anger had crystallized into something colder, sharper, that what she and her friends had done was not just rude, it was theft. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might actually get stuck that way. She refused to pay me back for anything. Not the pasta. Not the snacks. Not even the oat milk, which I had to special order because I am lactose intolerant and need it for my morning coffee unless I want to spend the rest of the day doubled over in pain. Fine, I thought. If she wanted to play that game, I would play it better. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and a calculator and started making a list. Every item they had eaten. Every container they had finished. Every snack they had swiped. I pulled up my grocery delivery receipts, checked my bank transactions, even did a quick estimate for things like the half-empty jar of peanut butter I had to throw out after finding someone's dirty spoon sticking out of it. I totaled everything up, added a small, very reasonable surcharge for the hassle of replacing everything and dealing with the fallout, and printed it out. It came to a little over $200. I printed it on the brightest piece of paper I could find neon yellow and taped it right in the center of the fridge where nobody could miss it. I wrote, in bold letters across the top, amount due for stolen groceries and detailed every item underneath, line by line. Chips $5, yogurt $2, pasta, $7, half-gallon oat milk $5, granola bars $7, and so on. Then, at the bottom, I wrote in giant, underlined letters pay me or I will find another way. So I wrote up an itemized list, taped it to the fridge, and told her that if she didn't pay up, I'd find another way. Update 2. Things got even messier after I posted the itemized list on the fridge, brighter than the sun and impossible to ignore. I had expected some grumbling, some passive-aggressive silence, maybe even a childish tantrum complete with slammed cabinet doors and exaggerated sighs. What I had not counted on was just how vindictive Madison could get when she felt cornered. She flat out refused to pay. She stood there one afternoon, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, telling me I was being ridiculous, that it was just food, and that I should not have to live with someone so uptight. She said it with this sneer, like I was some uptight old librarian clutching my pearls over a stolen cookie, completely ignoring the fact that it was my groceries they had plundered like pirates raiding a supply ship, and my paycheck they had essentially set on fire. Instead of addressing it like an adult, sitting down to talk things through, Madison decided the mature course of action was to declare full-scale, no-holds-barred war. It started small, almost laughably childish. I would find my neatly labeled containers moved to bizarre places. My almond milk, which I kept on the easy-to-reach top shelf, suddenly found itself jammed into the bottom corner of the fridge, half buried under a precarious mountain of beer cans and takeout containers that smelled like stale pad thai. My box of granola bars, which I had placed carefully in my assigned pantry space, showed up one day stuffed into the drawer that held our mess of mismatched Tupperware lids. I stood there that first time, granola bars in hand, thinking that maybe, just maybe, it was a coincidence. Kitchens get messy. People make mistakes. But it got worse. Much worse. It stopped being about accidents. One night, after a long shift that had already drained the last of my patience, I opened the pantry looking for my almond butter, one of the few luxuries I allowed myself, the kind of thing that made a miserable day feel slightly less miserable, and it was gone. I tore the kitchen apart, growing more frantic with each passing minute, until finally I found it, stuffed deep inside an empty cereal box that had been shoved to the back of the bottom shelf, hidden behind Madison's abandoned, dusty Cheerios. It was like a cruel treasure hunt where the prize was the thing you had already paid for. Another time, rushing out the door late for work, I yanked open the freezer to grab a frozen meal I had carefully labeled days before. Instead of seeing the neat row of meals I had prepped for the week, I found chaos. Every single one of my frozen foods had been moved, jammed behind 3 enormous bags of ice, old mystery meats I did not recognize, and someone's sad, half-eaten pint of freezer-burned ice cream. I had to practically crawl inside the freezer to dig my meals out, my hands going numb from the cold while I cursed under my breath. Even the labels themselves were under siege. Some days I would come home to find half of them missing entirely, peeled off with greasy fingers that left smudges across the containers. Others had been crudely scratched out with what looked like the tip of a key or the edge of a butter knife. A few labels had mocking doodles drawn next to them, little stick figures eating food with devil horns, just in case I dared to believe this was all innocent fun and not a targeted campaign to make me as miserable as possible. It became obvious that Madison and her friends thought the whole situation was hilarious, like my attempts to set basic, adult boundaries were some grand comedy for them to perform. Every trip to the kitchen became a battle. Every meal became an obstacle course. Cooking simple dinner took twice as long because I had to track down ingredients that had been deliberately hidden, moved, or sabotaged. It was exhausting in a way that crept under your skin and lived there, a constant background hum of anger and frustration that made the apartment feel less like a home and more like enemy territory. I realized eventually that confronting Madison again would be pointless. She thrived on the attention, on the drama, on any opportunity to twist the narrative and make me look like the unreasonable one. She wanted me to snap. She wanted to keep poking until I lost my temper so she could claim the moral high ground. She was banking on me getting so tired and drained that I would just roll over and let her win. She underestimated me. That was when I decided to escalate in a way she would never expect. During move-in weekend, months ago when things still felt fresh and full of potential, I had met Madison's mom. A tall, polished woman with immaculate hair and a voice that sounded like it had been trained for formal brunches and charity galas. She had helped Madison set up her room, arranging pillows just so, giving advice about where to hang frames, fussing over kitchen towels. It was obvious even then that she had high expectations. And I remembered something important. Madison had casually mentioned that her mom was footing the bill for her rent until she graduated. It took me less than 5 minutes to find her on Facebook. I spent that night carefully crafting a message. I kept it respectful. No insults, no rants, no emotional language. Just facts. I laid out everything, the surprise party that wrecked our apartment, the food that had disappeared overnight, Madison's complete refusal to replace it, and the increasingly hostile behavior that had turned living with her into a nightmare. I attached the photos I had taken for my own sanity, the peeled-off labels, the hidden almond butter, the itemized list taped proudly to the fridge. I explained that I was not trying to stir up drama or cause trouble, I simply wanted to live somewhere my belongings were respected. I sent the message around midnight, feeling a strange, calm satisfaction settle over me. It was out of my hands now. The next morning, the difference was immediate and unmistakable. When I walked into the kitchen, Madison was already there, sitting rigidly at the table, staring at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. The second she saw me, she scrambled to her feet, practically running across the room. Without a word, she pulled me into the hallway, her movements jerky and frantic. She shoved an envelope into my hand like it was something radioactive, muttering something under her breath. I opened it then and there and found a thick stack of cash, not just enough to cover the itemized list, but an extra $20 tucked in, like a silent bribe to never involve her mother again. From the little she managed to choke out, it sounded like her mom had absolutely lost it. Furious was not even the word. Her mom had apparently spent all night blowing up Madison's phone with calls and texts, laying into her about responsibility, respect, embarrassment, and the shame of having to hear about her daughter's behavior from a near stranger online. The threat had been crystal clear: pay me back immediately, or lose her rent support altogether. Madison's pride might have been bruised to hell and back, but it was nothing compared to the horror of imagining herself having to find and afford a new apartment alone. And the cherry on top. A few hours later, while I sat at the kitchen table finally enjoying one of my properly labeled frozen meals without the fear of sabotage, I got 2 Venmo notifications back to back. Tyler, yes, the same Tyler who had once smirked as he peeled my label off in front of me, sent me $30 with the note, for the yogurt LOL. Another one of Madison's freeloading party friends followed right after, sending $20 labeled, party food donation. Even better, a few hours later two of Madison's friends Venmo'd me money too. Update 3. After everything, the sabotage, the cash envelope, the Venmo pings from her freeloading friends, I thought that was where things would end. I figured we would just exist in a state of Cold War until our lease ran out. I never imagined Madison would actually sit down with me and have a real conversation like an adult, but a few nights after everything went down, that was exactly what happened. It was late, and I had just finished cleaning up after dinner. I was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone when Madison came out of her room, looking awkward and fidgety. I braced myself for another round of passive-aggressive nonsense, but to my surprise, she asked if we could talk. She actually sat down across from me, wringing her hands like someone about to confess to a crime. She said she was sorry. Not in the half-assed way people toss out apologies when they want you to shut up about something, but in a way that actually seemed genuine. She admitted that she had not realized how serious I was about food boundaries, that she had grown up in a house where everyone shared everything without asking, and she just assumed that was normal. She said that when her mom got involved, it snapped her out of her defensiveness and made her realize how badly she had handled things. She did not try to make excuses. She did not blame me for overreacting or accuse me of being dramatic. She just apologized. It was not some magical movie moment where suddenly all the tension disappeared, but it was honest, and that counted for a lot. We ended up talking for over an hour. We agreed that we needed to set some basic, non-negotiable roommate rules if we were going to survive the rest of our lease without killing each other. The first rule: no touching anything that is not yours. If you did not buy it, do not eat it, do not move it, do not even look at it too long. The second rule: if someone wants to throw a party, they have to give at least 48 hours notice, and it has to be a discussion, not a declaration. The third rule: if you invite guests into the apartment and they consume anything that is not yours, you are fully responsible for replacing it. No arguments, no eye rolls, no pretending you did not notice it missing. Madison even offered, on her own, to buy me a full week's worth of groceries as a gesture of goodwill. She said she wanted to show that she was serious about making things right, and honestly, that was more than I had expected. She pulled out her phone right there and asked me to send her a list of what I needed, and the next day, she came back from the store with everything I had asked for, plus a few extra snacks she thought I might like. It was a small thing, but it meant a lot. Since then, things have actually been okay. We are not best friends. We do not stay up late gossiping or planning wine nights. We mostly do our own thing. She has her friends over sometimes, but they are quieter now, and Madison makes sure to check in with me before inviting anyone. The kitchen is no longer a battlefield. I can open the fridge and find my oat milk exactly where I left it, untouched, unbothered, peacefully chilling in its rightful spot. It is a weird kind of peace, the kind that feels tentative but solid enough to believe in. The petty games have stopped. The labels have stayed on. And while there is still an invisible line drawn between us, the kind that comes from surviving a messy roommate war, at least it is a line we both respect now. It took an absurd amount of drama to get here, but standing in the kitchen on a quiet Tuesday night, drinking coffee made with my own oat milk, I realized that sometimes boundaries are messy to build, but worth every ounce of effort once they are finally standing tall. We are not besties or anything, but at least now I can keep oat milk in the fridge without fearing for its